All right, welcome back. We are going to be moving now on to Unit 5. So we're going to move on to ecology, and I hope you enjoy this. I'll admit ecology is not one of my strong points, but I think it's really important that you understand it a little bit more because it's super important and we need to love our environment a little bit more. So hopefully after these next 2 units, you'll get a little bit understanding. I hope you'll enjoy the activities you get to do for it. And you might know a little bit more than you already think you do about ecology, but let's get into it. So first off, what is ecology? Well, it's the study of interactions between living organisms and the physical environment. So this is going to play a huge role in how things are distributed and how much of abundance we have of living things. Which is important because we use these as resources. We use them for building things. We use it as food. We use it as for fuel sources. There's all kinds of stuff out there, and we need to make sure that we understand this a little bit better. Now, one thing that we need to do is we need to get a better understanding of ecosystem and how we utilize our Earth's resources. It's really, like, I hate to say this is a really controversial topic because I seriously worry for the future because, we can't keep living the way we are. It's short things, changes that we make now will really have an impact later on. And that's with ecology. People normally like to see instantaneous results. But with ecology, it's slow changes over time. And the way the human population is growing, and we'll have a whole lecture on that, and just how much it has changed and all the impact we've had. It's really scary when you think about it, especially as a biologist, when you step back and look, it's like, oh my gosh. And just by making some small changes, it could have an impact. Now, ecology covers so many areas when it comes to biology. All of these, biochem, physiology, evolution, molecular biology, geology, physics, all this come together under the scope of ecology. It's actually a really diverse field. So if you had me for 1408, we went through all the classification of organization from the very, very, very small atom all the way up to where we got to the biosphere. So I just want to remind you on this second half. So we're going to start off with the organism. So this is just an individual that's born. So example, we're talking about this tree right here. It's going to grow and it's going to die. Circle of life. Wah, wah, wah. And then we're going to have our next level up, which is a population. So this is a group of individuals co-occurring in the same area. So it's all going to be the same species. So it's this tree, but it's all his little similar tree friends, all the same species. That's a population. The next level up is a community. So these are populations of different species, and they're going to occur in the same area. They do or they don't have to interact. They could care less or they could be best friends. So this is saying we have our cute little fox-like critter here. I'm not sure exactly what he is, but he's living with the trees. He's living with the shrub. He's probably living with all these different types of insect species. So that is a community, or they're all hanging out together. Now, the next level up is called an ecosystem. So this is the combination of the community plus all the things called the abiotic environment. So these are going to be both the living and the non-living factors. So this is where we're going to bring in the land, the sun, the precipitation, the heat, all that comes together in combination with the little creatures to make up your ecosystem. And then finally, our highest level is going to be what we call the biosphere. So this is where we're going to have all the different ecosystems on Earth. And in the next unit, we'll talk about the different type of ecosystems there happen to be. So there's different levels of ecology that you can look at. One of them is at the organism level, or organism ecology. So this is just studying unique things about organisms and how that helps them adapt to survive in specific habits. It could be things like their morphology, how they look, how they behave, and their physiology. All of this comes together in this part of ecology. The example the book gives you is talking about this Carner blue butterfly and how it's a specialist. What that means is that it's only going to have a relationship with this plant called the wild lupine. And what it does is it lays its eggs on there. So this organism is completely dependent on this organism. If the blue lupine, wild lupine, goes away, this guy has no place to lay her eggs, and then eventually she will go away and that species will disappear. So it's just saying how dependent they are upon each other. Now, the next level up is population ecology, and this is where you just study where different populations are identified and where they live. What's interesting about population biology, you can have natural or artificial boundaries. It varies. It's really interesting. We'll do a whole lecture just on human population. And what this map is showing is the population density of humans on Earth. And I find it quite fascinating because you can see certain areas where there's not a lot of people, but remember those environments up here, it's really cold. A good part of Australia, it's really harsh. Here's your Sahara Desert. And then you see certain areas, especially here in China and India, where the population is super dense. And, same thing with the United States over in the east, and then you could probably see little snippets of population density. Now, population ecology is going to focus on the number of individuals in an area. And they like to study how that population changes over size because depending on what you're looking at, if it's a certain type of, wild animal, if it's starting to get displaced over time by more urban sprawl, you'll see it probably relocate to a different location, but then maybe a different type of species might proliferate in that area. So, like as I mentioned, we're going to have a whole lecture just on human population, and it's kind of scary because it's actually doubled in less than 50 years, which I find that quite fascinating. And it makes you wonder, what long-term changes are we going to see from all these people? And I will say this quite often, what will affect growth rate in the future? I'm interested in long-term to see what this current pandemic's going to do. I'm not saying it's being a mass kill-off like the plagues back in the day, but is this really going to have effect later on people's ideas long-term, how large families will be, and all kinds of other different things. Our next level up is the community ecology. So this is where you're studying how different species interact within an area. And they like to study the interactions and how those interactions kind of play along with each other. We have a limited amount of resources, so we're going to have competition for them. Now, is it a knockout, drag-out fight, or do they actually fight fair, or is it a mutualistic? There's all kinds of different interactions that happen to be out there. You can have where we have the predators, where we have parasites, where one's going to benefit, the other one's not going to. We have the herbivores, we have competition, pollination. There is so much with this, but community ecology is just studying all these different interactions between different species. Now, your next big level up would be the ecosystem, and that's where it pretty much stops off when you're studying broad areas of ecology. Now, this is combining your biotic, which is your living, and your abiotic factors, the non-living. So this little cartoon is kind of showing you. So living is all the stuff that we've been talking about so far. Now, living is like the land, the water, the wind, the temperature, natural disasters, things that you can't control, climate, all that stuff. Now, what you're going to have to do for one of your assignments is you're going to have to go and document an ecosystem, and you'll take pictures of biotic and abiotic factors. You can go down to the Trinity River. That's a prime example. You can get that assignment done pretty easily. I'll talk about it more on one of the weekly updates, or you can just ask me questions about it. Now, with your biotic factors, remember that's your living stuff, and you're going to see them when we talk a little bit more about some of the different ways these animals can compete against each other. Will actually determine what quality of species and the type that you have in that area. So I wanted to kind of just introduce some of the hot topics in ecology. I know that's what these next couple of slides are going to hit on, and these are areas that are getting a lot of discussion, and maybe you might not be aware as much about them. I know there's a lot of words on these slides, and I'm going to hit on the main points. So one big one is pollution. We have pollution of the air, the water, the soil, and it takes a while to actually clean that up. You know, how much the motor vehicle industry has taken off is a big one. And now you see this push later on. It's like, okay, maybe we need to get more towards electric cars. We're putting so much with fertilizers and stuff into our soils, and then that goes into our water. There's so much that's going on with that. It's really kind of scary, but I just want to mention that's like one topic. And, you know, it just breaks my heart when you see, like, especially after big rains, when you see the trash along the river, because I do like to walk on the trails quite often. And, you know, come on, people, just pick it up and put it away. Or another thing that gets me is people that don't pick up their dog poop, but the ones that are worse are the ones that pick it up and put it in the bag and then leave the bag on the ground. I'm like, you're totally like going against it, and it's not someone else's job to carry your dog's poop to a trash can. Seriously, you can carry it a little bit further. Another kind of links with pollution is waste disposal. So we do generate a lot of waste. Plastic is a big one. I've watched several things on Netflix about plastics and are dependent on it, and how different companies are trying to change that. So there are companies that are recycling plastic and making it into other things. This is quite interesting. On nuclear waste is a quite fascinating one too, especially with that last blow up. I forgot exactly where it happened, but like how that impacts the environment. I always think of Chernobyl. That was a great series on HBO, so go watch that. What I did see with this current pandemic is we saw so much of an increase of our use on one-use plastics because, you know, with all the takeout. So it was kind of, we were kind of moving towards like, yeah, we're not going to use it as much, and then all of a sudden this hit, and now we're so much more dependent on it. One that you've talked about before, if you took me for 1408, is overpopulation. I always wonder how we're going to feed all these people at the rate that human population is growing. We only have so much room, and we only have so much land that we can use to produce food. So that's a current problem I think about. You know, think about how cities keep spreading. Every time you like go somewhere, next thing you know, here's another apartment complex going up. It's one of those things that we're going to have to talk about. Natural resource depletion. So we only have so much of this, and we're so dependent on certain things like coal and oil and all the other stuff. And there are a lot of great renewable resources that we should be using. There's like a shift more to use more solar and wind, but then some people are like totally against that because, you know, oil is big money. So it costs money to get that infrastructure going, but maintaining it, you know, could be quite beneficial in the long run. So these two kind of go together, global warming and climate change. In the next unit, there'll be a whole just lecture on climate change. It's a hot topic. I'm not going to say if you're wrong or right if you believe in it. I do think it's an important thing. And I think people, they kind of confuse climate and weather a lot. They're like, well, you know, it snowed, so, and it's not 90 degrees outside every day, so it's just fine. But you know, if you think about long term, there have been changes. Even in just my lifetime, I've seen changes. But global warming is a thing. Ice caps are melting, and then that is taking away, you know, a whole ecosystem where organisms thrive. And then that water has to go somewhere, so that's going to cause sea levels to eventually rise. Think about all the population that lives along the coastlines, and then we're starting to see more and more flash floods, and it's kind of, you know, kind of a scary thing to think about, but we'll have a whole lecture on that. Gosh, it's kind of depressing after a while. A big thing back in the 90s was the ozone layer depletion. So our ozone is this layer, it's an invisible layer of protection around your planet, and it protects us from the sun's harmful rays because, you know, sun's pretty brutal, and this ozone does protect us. And we're noticing we had holes in it, and a lot of it was coming from a lot of these sprays that we were using, chlorofluorocarbons, and now these have been banned, and we're starting to see the ozone hole shrink. There's a big one over Antarctica, so this is something that we've seen some progress on that. I think that's a better one. We're actually seeing changes were made, and we're seeing it get better. A big one that is scary right now is loss of biodiversity. So biodiversity is just like all the different combination of species you have in an area, and they all interplay and act with each other. We'll talk about food chains and food webs in the next unit. Now, human activity is leading to the extinction of species and habitats because, we need more places to live, so we take over a habitat. Now, those organisms living in that area are now displaced. It took a long time to perfect these ecosystems, and then we don't realize the impact humans have on them, and sometimes it can be quite damaging. So I put right here another example: destruction of coral reefs in various oceans. You will watch some videos about coral reef bleaching, which you don't realize how important coral reefs are to certain areas, and they are starting to disappear at surprising, alarming rates. Deforestation is a big one. We need a lot of lumber and timber, and we use it for other things, and then it's just for land that we overtake. Sometimes we replace it with farmland. But our forests are like natural sinks of carbon dioxide. So remember, carbon dioxide, it's your waste product, but that's the input for plants for photosynthesis. Well, we have that excess building up of CO2 in the atmosphere, not just from all of us breathing, but from other things too. And if we're taking away the plants that are essential for recycling that carbon dioxide into oxygen, where is it going to be? I know there are other sources, and that's one thing scientists are trying to study. It's like, can we get artificial plants? Can we use the ocean more to do that? So that'll be a whole nother topic that we can talk about. These two kind of go hand in hand: acid rain and water pollution. So acid rain, you don't hear about it too much, but it does happen in certain areas. It can have some serious effects on human health and wildlife and aquatic species, and it's just, a combination of factors that kind of contribute to it. The water pollution does kind of scare me because clean drinking water is a rare commodity. We probably don't appreciate it as much as we do. Because we just go down the hall and there's the water fountain right there. We have bottled water out the wazoo, which is contributing to the plastic problem. But this is something that worldwide that people are having to deal with, because eventually we only have so much fresh water. Most of it's actually salt water. So we have to think of other processes, maybe desalinization as a way to get more water. These two kind of work together. Urban sprawl. So people are growing. Cities keep getting bigger and bigger. I swear, every time you go somewhere, like as I mentioned, there's a new complex. There's a new subdivision coming up. Every time this happens, we're displacing whatever the natural habitat was there before. But, the human population is growing and we have to go somewhere. So we kind of like to spread out. And then there's tons of public health issues associated with ecology. I've mentioned the drinking water problems, and there's like toxins that can actually be in it. I always think of Flint and their problems with water. It was lead. Pollution in the atmosphere causing respiratory problems like asthma, cardiovascular problems. Sometimes we get those. It's a poor air quality day. That just happens. It's what we live in a city where we drive a lot. That's just what we have to deal with. And with all this urban sprawl and all the other stuff, you're starting to see flooding happen often, especially like areas like Houston. Well, you take away the wetlands that naturally absorb all that water and replace it with parking lots. Where do you think the water's going to go? And then we have all these flooding problems. Now that I've depressed you, it's not all that bad. I know a lot of these topics are linked together, and improvement one will influence the other areas. I just think we need to increase public awareness. And you have seen more of this. It's more about recycling and reducing, reusing, recycle. That's really caught on in later years, and I think there's a lot more we can do. I always think that whenever you're going somewhere, always leave a place better than how you found it. Even if it's just picking up an extra piece of trash that you didn't make, you're improving it. That's just a motto I have. It's just the way I am. If I see something, I will try to make it better before I leave. Now, I hate to say that. I wish it was not a political topic, but it is one. And I do, like I said, I fear for future generations. I don't have kids, but I'm really scared for what my nieces and nephews will have to deal with in the future, because they will have to deal with what we did. And it's kind of scary. And you are seeing the younger generation really start to speak up. So That was just introducing it. Of course, as usual, there's some review videos, and then here are my image credits.